Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the DuvalDive. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game.
And I'm Travis Holmes with BigCatCountry.com.
And you're listening to this thing on the Believe Podcast Network. Travis, we've had a great time talking to various people. I mean, listen, we had JP Acosta and Emery Hunt, both of CBS Sports. We're in talks. We haven't scheduled it yet, but Jordan DeLugo, we're trying to make that happen. Generation Jaguar. And I'm in talks with having another person that works at CBS Sports possibly do fantasy talk for Jags players. It's a whole thing. We got a lot going on here on the DuvalDive. But Travis and I figured it was time for you and I to address some things we've seen out there in the wild and in the public amongst the Duval devout. Because, hey, I'm an honorary member. Travis carries his card. We want to be a part of this community with you, too, as well on occasion. Part of that, by the way, is Travis. It's going to be a rookie mini camp on Saturday representing Big Cat Country. Isn't it cool when I plug it for you, dude? And looking that over. So make sure you check out whatever it is he drops there on Saturday from Miller Electric Field. But with all that in mind, the framing of this episode, I want to make very clear. There are people who think the Jaguars got worse with this draft and people who think they got better. Right. We are going to, as objectively as we can, argue both sides, and we opted to do the why the Jaguars got worse first. Now, we don't necessarily feel this way about it, so don't come all at me like Frank and, think this.
You are the dumbest effing MFer I've ever seen. You don't know S. How in the world can you even have a job? How can you even have a family? You're a moron. You're an idiot. You're a effing dumb effer. How could you even have that opinion? Go die.
By the way, according to Travis, you need to take a drink. So with all that being said, I love the clip. I'm sorry. With that being said, it's time to explore this. Travis, what do you got, buddy?
Nah, man. Our best good faith effort to examine both sides of this fan base. If you've spent any time in the comment thread on YouTube or the Jaguars Today or what in any show, you feel like a guy wearing a hazmat suit because it's a little toxic out on both sides of the line. Some people think this team's gotten better and different. Some teams think this team has gotten significantly worse and they're worried about the season. We're making our best good faith effort to truly examine both sides of this argument and what it truly is versus what it ain't, and what's people kind of crashing out when they shouldn't be. I'm starting with linebacker. I think that's an obvious and the easy answer for most people that's kind of been here.
100%.
You lose an all-pro linebacker, and you haven't had very many all-pros in this Duval devout fan base to watch on TV that wasn't on special teams, let's say. Ross Madisick, shout out to him. Long snapper for the Jaguars. But Devin Lloyd, you lose that guy, and you still have, you still have Foye Oluokun. So you're good in that spot, but you have a lot of questions that remain to be answered, and we'll have to see what happens in the season. But we talked about this on, I believe, on Monday's Duval Dive. You got the Ventrell Miller position, which frankly feels like the role was just handed to him when we haven't seen much evidence on the field that shows you that he necessarily has earned it. They're giving him that open runway, basically.
Right.
And if it doesn't work out, there might be some concern because the person backing him up also doesn't seem to have actually shown you the ability on field, on the tape, to actually dominate in that position. Jack Kaiser, that's now we're there. So overall, you have a 7th round draft pick in Parker Hughes that you brought in. So I don't think there's much of an argument to be made there, even if you're being reasonable in the fan base to say they got better in that position. Your best case scenario is a hope and a prayer that they held steady to where they were. And I don't know if that's necessarily being fair to their argument, honestly.
Well, and moreover, I'll add this, right? You're setting up the scenario with Ventrell Miller where I know I was with Devin Lloyd last year. You have to be like George Michael. You've got to have faith with the Jaguars did in Devin Lloyd. I very clearly didn't, and I'm still, like I mentioned when I said it to Emery Hunt on Wednesday, I'm still apologizing for that lack of faith. But for those that have that same issue trusting Ventrell Miller, I'm kind of there. I don't think, and who, see, that's the thing. Where's the bar for success, though? Even at his best, is he going to do another Devin Lloyd? Probably not. So just by extension, the team, that linebacker core, is going to be at least a little worse.
Well, I mean, Anthony Campanelli, to his credit, maybe you're telling me that it's not that you believe in Ventrell Miller. It may be that you believe in Anthony Campanelli, and that could be just a full stop there. It's not that I'm saying that they got better. I just think Anthony Campanelli can do what he did with Quay Walker. He had Quay Walker having his best season, and then Anthony Campanelli leaves and he kind of falls off that following season. Okay, cool. I can understand if you want to be on the positive side of that line. Also, again, I'm not trying to just say it has to be this way, but because he did the same thing with Devin Lloyd. We saw the worst version of Devin Lloyd in Ryan Nielsen's defense, and we saw the best version of him in Anthony Campanelli. So right. If you think that may be the case with Ventrell Miller, I understand that argument. I'm not saying you're wrong or right. I am still saying it is a hope. So we will see kind of where it lands, but I don't think the argument exists to be made to say that the Jaguars objectively got better sight unseen. They'll have to be able to prove it on the field. No different than how Devin Lloyd had to prove it in 2025. They'll have to redo it again.
Well, and if it doesn't turn out, Travis, I can make the argument that this particular room is the one that's the least competition laden out there, right? What else is there if Ventrell Miller fails? Other guys that you've already acquired that you're hoping can do it instead. To me, it doesn't feel like it's a lot of competition. It might even be the least Stonesian position group out there from that perspective. Right. And it's a whole reason why we did an episode on whether the front office values linebackers, which I had a lot of fun doing, frankly.
I actually considered labeling this position group very much how I view the defensive tackle position heading into 2025. When they struggled to get adequate depth, my immediate thought was, dang, and they didn't bring in anybody else that's going to give them a real kick when they needed a pass rush help, when they needed someone else. That's exactly how I feel about the linebacker room right now, and I'm going to be honest about that. Like, it felt one way when you had Ventrell Miller / Devin Lloyd as co-starters. That feels like if this doesn't work out, I got someone who I think might be reasonably close. Now you feel all right with that. All right, now this is different. This is Ventrell Miller. This is your job. And if this don't work out, we'll see what happens with Jack Kaiser. Maybe that works out. Maybe it doesn't. But all of a sudden, you don't feel great because the Jaguars did feel at one point in the middle of the season like they were floundering, looking for another option when Eric Armstead kind of fell off. And they didn't have and Mason Smith wasn't giving them functional depth and all of that happening. There was a few week time frame where the Jaguars were kind of just trying to figure out what they could do there. That's what this linebacker role feels like to me. So that's, again, why I say this is the easiest one to kind of land on. All right, the Jaguars definitely feel like they did not get better, and they probably easily can argue they got worse at linebacker. Yeah, I'm landing on that. And next up I had
Well, I was going to say, let me segue it to it this way. Part of the other reason why I think the linebackers are exposed as they are and why that is the biggest element where they got worse is the position most responsible for peripherally anchoring them is the defensive line. This is a problem as well, right? What they did to make up for this, I don't think is enough. You're hoping for Eric Armstead to stay healthy when he's old man not Rivers, that's a different team. But when he's, certainly the senior guy on the squad, and maybe there's still time for them to move it and perhaps take care of the, what is it, a $12 or $18 million cap pick? I forget what it is for Eric Armstead. I know for Devon Hamilton, it's 8 or 9 as well. That's another way this group is holding down this team. But on the field, there's a lot of dudes I feel like that aren't named Eric Armstead that could still get pushed the hell out of the way by this group, and that does nothing to augment the linebacker. So I'm doing kind of a twofer, hitting the D line and the linebackers as well. And Travis, they're officially handcuffed at edge rusher. They got guard deck. They have Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. If you're bringing in other rotational guys, that's cool, but that means you're making a lot of money sit on the bench when they're not in.
Well, I mean, for me, when I'm looking at the D-line, I'm not even worried about the edge rushers. I'm actually cool with the edge rushers, as interesting as that is. When you tell me things that they got worse at, Edge rusher is not even on my radar. Interior D-line,
That's why
do
about the
think that they got,
contracts. That might be the one criticism you can make.
Oh, yeah, the money maybe, but yeah, sure. But I'm looking at the interior D-line. Eric Armstead, we know what happened in 2025 with the second half of the season after his injury. He falls off. You're hoping that's obviously just specific to the injury and not age or anything along those lines, because Father Time is undefeated. But yeah, you're hoping, and that is a hope. I'm just being clear. But how do I think they got worse if they have the same guy, Eric Armstead, and they have Devon Hamilton, who was there? Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, Duval, we all thought they needed another interior 3 technique option to make this team better. They did not get that. And I don't think I'm being unreasonable. I don't think I'm being unfair in saying that. They did draft Albert Regis. Great at giving a little bit of a push from the interior. Like, you're hoping that he's going to be able to give you something in the pass game. But for the most part, his strength was stopping the run. Okay, cool. You trade Mason Smith for Rook Ororo. I understand that also. It seems like it's a good coin flip opportunity for the Jacksonville Jaguars to maybe find some functional depth from that move.
It's another safe play. Yeah.
It is a hope, though.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that that's not the case. It is a hope and a prayer that is going to work out. Because again, if you told me tomorrow that Jalen Hunt or TJ Bowlers or one of those undrafted free agent guys ended up working their way up and challenging Matt Dickerson or challenging Rook for a roster spot, I also would equally tell you I am not surprised, because if they truly believe in real competition. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of this guy play to tell me what he is versus what he ain't. And I'm okay saying that. So if you were to tell me, hey, I don't think they got better, I also don't know that they got worse, but I think it's very close. Like, I think it's truly that difference. That ain't great, because again, everyone knew the main thing that they needed was a penetrating 3 technique defensive tackle. They didn't get it. So, and if you're not getting better, you are getting worse, especially when other teams are actively getting better play from their offensive line. The Houston Texans and all these other teams that you're going to be playing against have improved. So if you didn't get better, you actively got worse. You hustling backwards at that point.
Well, and it's less that you're hustling backwards. It's just everybody's running faster than you while you puffing for air. I mean, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think that there's an absolute argument to be made. They got worse because they simply sat on their hands and allowed guys to have the development opportunity to grow into that role. Hopefully they succeed, because if they don't, and Eric Armstead does fall off and Devon Hamilton isn't able to give you more in the pass rush game, I would hate for Jaguar fans to be looking at themselves again like, dang, man, why we didn't pick up one of them DTs in the draft? Or
why didn't we get Sexy Dexy? Whatever,
we all knew that was a need. So that, again, that's another opportunity where I think that if it doesn't come to pass where the Jaguars aren't able to kind of get home, then yeah, I think folks are going to be looking at themselves sideways like that's a missed opportunity for the Jacksonville Jaguars, unfortunately.
Yeah, for these next couple position groups, I think this is stuff that is less out of the Jaguars' control. Maybe they didn't do enough to address it draft-wise, but I think there's some things where they're kind of handcuffed and stuck. And the first of those, of course, being the offensive line. I mean, looking at the picture of Patrick McCarry here and me mentioning things out of the Jaguars' control, right? Injuries, the conversation. Patrick McCarry, how healthy will he be next year? Cole Van Lannon and his situation and that mystery such that it is, shouts to Mike DiRocco for the effort he's done in explaining what he has. Shouts to D-Rock that there has been any sort of injury concern surrounding Cole Van Lannon. But at day's end, we've had the conversation many times. I prefer Walker Little as an overpriced guard than the left tackle. And now that Pregnon's in the building, along with Wyatt Milam, there's less value in having an overpriced guard. But meanwhile, Walker Little's still in there while Cole Van Lannon is hurt. And that's a whole other situation. We're hoping an awful lot with a lot more faith that dudes that are UDFAs that we talked about with Emory Hunt can make an impact at the tackle position. That's never where you want to be when you're trying to keep your dude Trevor Lawrence intact.
Right. And they brought in an offensive lineman. Good job. They brought in, you get a golf clap for that. Like, you brought in an offensive lineman in a situation where I thought that I was going to be happy if they would have drafted 2 or drafted 1 and brought in 1 in free agency or something along those lines, because at the end of the day, they could not run the ball in the second half of the season after being top 5 in the league at running the ball for those first, I believe it was 6 games, if not 7. That is problematic to me. Now, again, you can say that Patrick McCarry was injured to start the season. He was injured in training camp. All these things are actually factual and supported by the evidence. But you can also equally say, cool, he was also injured a lot when he was in Baltimore. And is he going to stay and remain healthy throughout this 2025 season? Or how do you feel about Wyatt Milam? How are you going to feel about Emmanuel Pregnon, who you passed on twice before drafting when his range was around the 40 range? How do you actually feel about that prospect in and of itself? Right. Or is it just you had to take him and you will see what happens with him? Like, is that someone who's actually going to be able to materially play in 2025? So many questions as far as that's concerned. Again, you did add one guy, but then you're still looking at the tackle position. The left tackle position was the one that effectively, honestly, I would hate to say any one person lost them a game, but it felt very much like that Walker Little performance in the Cincinnati Bengals game might have lost them that game.
It was a fact that Liam Coen lost them that game by not taking the points, but enough about that.
You don't know what your injury situation looks like with Cole Van Lannon. We already talked about that, like with the rumored ACL injury, rumored ACL surgery, and what that's going to look like early in the season. You are objectively worse on offensive line there. As long as if you think Walker Little is going to be your starting left tackle to start the season, you are worse than in 20.
Yeah,
you are objectively worse on your offensive line to start the season. And even if you don't think Cole Van Lannon is going to be, is Cole Van Lannon going to be the guy who you gave the money to? I mean, that's another area of the conversation I didn't think about till just now. Like, wait a minute. You still have an offensive lineman that's going to be 300 plus pounds coming off an ACL surgery and the ACL injury late last season. And we're talking literally the last week of the season, last quarter of the season. Yeah. Is that going to be the same guy you paid the money to also? Hopefully. Yeah. But in the meantime, you got Walker Little, the guy who all y'all wanted out the paint, is your starting left tackle. Again, at best, you can say you are equal to where you were, but not equal to where you were in the second half of the season when you loved the play of this offense. You're worse. Objectively, making the argument, you are a worse unit right now. And that should be concerning, honestly.
And that's the part that's consistent in these three positions, Travis, right? Faith and hope are too much part of the conversation. You're hoping Cole Van Lannon comes back at strength and on time. And another piece where I feel like a lot of hope is getting involved. And also injuries are a huge factor. It's your house, baby. It's the corners. But Kyle, Travis Hunter's going to be starting a lot at corner, and he's going to play corner exclusively. First of all, Humpy Bumpies, no, it's not exclusive. Jimmy Stone's told you himself on the Rich Eisen show, so enough of that crap. Okay. Got that out of my system. But despite the fact that Travis Hunter is going to play corner is an improvement, but again, George Michael is present in too many of these things. You have to have faith in not only Travis Hunter coming back in the fashion that you need him, Jordan Lewis and so many others in this group are trying to recover from injury, right? Caleb Bransaw. I know I'm missing some. You'll probably fill in the gaps very nicely as you do your part of the conversation. But simply put, the Jags are worse today because I don't know what I'm going to see in week 1.
I think you hit it on the head. You hit my point on that immediately on the head. Like it's primarily due to the injuries, and it's not just injuries, but it's also setbacks. And I'm going to be clear. Coach Coen, Tony Baselli, EVP, James Gladstone, they all seem to be emphatic about Travis Hunter playing more defensive back snaps this year. That's in addition to his wide receivers share being around the same or maybe around the same of where it was. That was the recent comment from James Gladstone on Wednesday, basically saying, there was no guarantee that his wide receiver snap share from 2025 would actually be reduced. So it's less of a real concern because I've seen, something to be concerned about, but more so is one of those just they're a caution. They're I wonder. They're a wonder, I guess is the best way I can probably say it, because they're planning for him to be full go by training camp. But again, you still got Jordan Lewis. That's a whole nother thing. You have the fact that setbacks exist. because none of us are doctors, but we've all seen how this is what the plan was, and then what the plan was ain't what the plan is. This happens frequently with the medical situations, so it's just kind of one of those things where you're going to have to continue playing it by day, week by week. But yeah, because Hunter and Jordan Lewis they're going to be currently limited in the offseason activities until around training camp. I mean, Gladstone said on Wednesday he's expected to be full-time Travis Hunter in training camp. So fingers crossed that all will be good, but it's kind of hard not to say they got, I won't even say worse at the cornerback position, because I don't think that's objectively true. I think I actually made the opposite argument on Monday's DuvalDive, saying I think they got better because they don't have to worry about Tyson Campbell and they don't have to worry about Monterey Brown.
And that's on paper and talent-wise. You did say that, right?
But the injury situation is, you can't avoid that. That'd be ridiculous if you did.
Again, it'll be right back to George Michael's in the building, and you have to have faith, and it's got to pull through.
And that's a lot of faith to be having at multiple different positions at the same time.
I know they play on Sundays, but damn.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But it's a lot of faith to have at multiple different positions all at the same time, hoping that all these things hit. Eventually, by the pure math and the pure coin flip of a situation, some of these things ain't gonna hit. And how are you going to then counter when those situations go negative, or when those dice roll snake eyes? That's going to be what makes or breaks this Jacksonville Jaguars 2026 season. But yeah, man, let's get to the next one.
Yeah, and for sure, I'm curious your thoughts on this. The running back position is another reason why the Jacksonville Jaguars are worse.
I mean, yeah, I think, the running back room, they absolutely got cheaper, but did they get worse? Like, let's just have a real conversation. Like, we know how folks in this Duval County fan base felt about Travis Etienne. And most of them absolutely wanted him here. And most of them also understood that they were not going to be paying that $11 million-ish range, that what he was going to be asking for with the salary cap situation of the Jaguars. Go ahead.
Well, and let's hold up on that for just a minute too. Like, you and I had already predicted he was going to be gone regardless, because the price tag was too high for a running back. Okay.
Yep.
And many members of the Duval Devout were like, oh, he's not all that good because he can't do X or Y between the tackles. And this was a narrative. This was a thing that happened. Don't go hiding on me now, Duval. Okay. Now, at this point, now that he's gone, everybody is chirping, as you're saying, oh, why did we get rid of him, et cetera, et cetera. Now, and listen, that's the tough decision that you have to have, is to remember it's a business and fall in like, not love, with players, right, Travis? What if we accuse Trent Baalke of doing wrong so often, playing good players like they great? Well, at the very least, Stone's got that right. However, did perhaps they get a little too cheap, would be the question I would ask.
Well, yeah, because again, you save the money and you wash the cap, and they're doing a really good job of that. I will give them all the credit. And we're going to talk about that in the future Duval Dive. They're doing such a good job with the dead cap, washing all of that so that they'll have a clean cap moving forward. 2027, same thing with the draft picks. They'll have a clean draft situation. 2027, I get all of that. And some hard decisions have to be made. I fully understand that. But this is one of those ones where you can obviously say, if you can pay De'Ami Brown $10 million, you can probably pay Travis Etienne 11. So they got cheaper. Did they get worse? And I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that the running back who led your team in receiving touchdowns and also earlier in the season was leading your rushing offense. Meanwhile, Bashaw Tutin wasn't doing much of anything. I mean, I think like he had the few receiving touchdowns earlier in the season, less than 100 overall rushes on the year. You are kind of blind in what you're presenting here as far as this is going to be the future of your running back room. Not to mention you're then adding Chris Rodriguez also to it, who, again, I'm a fan of both of these guys. Correct. We've had a whole podcast talking about how I am a fan of both of these guys, but I'm also not blind enough to say they could have absolutely gotten worse, because Travis Etienne, while he was incomplete as a running back, he was good at what he did, great in space. Absolutely. That's rough.
Well, and let's remember, too, when it comes to Bashaw, a lot of his numbers are elevated because he had some big home run moments, right? Think some statistical anomalies that you see with one Adrian Peterson. The dude would have several touches that are one or for a loss or for two and then break off something big. The difference is Bashaw Tootin seemed to always be getting shoestring tackled before he would break off a truly big one to go to the house. Did he still have some big ones? Sure, but nothing on the ground where he would, go all the way to the hizzy as say Travis Etienne would do when Benton Strange got an awesome block on, it used to be in the intro. That's all I'm saying. On the Panthers, that's right. But then the other element too was Chris Rodriguez is with C-Rod. The money they gave him felt like it was an awful lot to be a replacement for a guy you were trying to make cheaper on your roster, or a position, I should say. So,
yeah, I'm actually okay with how much they gave him. I'll give you that. Like, I got into an argument with Preston talking about that piece because I mean, you're talking $6 million guaranteed compared to, I believe, what Travis Etienne was like 25 or something along those lines. Like, it was a significant enough amount where if you're trying to wash the money, you're trying to use this in mob terms. If you're trying to wash the money and wash the cap, I guess, then
$19 million in guaranteed is absolutely significant. I'm not knocking.
And the guaranteed money is what matters. Like, at the end of the day, that's what my uncle used to always tell me, who was the former NFL agent. Like, no, don't worry about the BS money, the fluff money. The guaranteed money is what matters. That's the one. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think it was like a fourth of the actual guaranteed money, maybe a half of the actual contract when we were getting to the real numbers. Yeah, you're talking moderately significant money. And if you think you get even reasonably that production, it makes sense to me. Again, at the end of the day, when you're on the field and it's 4th and 1 and you don't get a first down, nobody gives a damn about how much money you did and didn't spend. Did you get better? Can you produce the results that we need on the field for that first down? We don't have a game played yet, but that's the question that's still lingering in there. And that's why this is a concerning position group for me personally.
It's an interesting thought. I'll grant you that. And now the last one, the one that'll probably surprise people the most that is here, in my opinion. Another reason the Jacksonville Jaguars got worse was at quarterback. Travis.
I mean, I know folks ain't gonna like to hear that one. And let me be real clear though, just to make sure this isn't me going off the rails. And Travis has not been drinking. None of this crazy stuff has been happening.
Yeah, the Kentucky Derby was last week. There's no mint juleps.
Yeah, Lawrence himself. There we go. There's your disclaimer right there. The opinions expressed in this segment are those of the speaker alone and do not reflect the views of the DuvalDive podcast. We all have Snickers moments.
We all have mint juleps. That's right.
Yeah. We got that out the way. It's not that Trevor Lawrence himself worries me. I want to be clear. It's more about a few different things happening in this conversation. The first piece of it is big for me. Whether or not Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to take that next step as far as completing those deep shots down the field, which was an entire 2025 year struggle from my perspective looking in. And we talked about this on multiple DuvalDives, how it was a struggle even when they were doing the Bahamas workouts in the YouTube videos. And we analyzed that. Was like, nah, man, they are off right now. And they never got onto the same page in the entire 2025 season. But the bigger thing for me, and it's not specific to Trevor Lawrence, it's not about Trevor Lawrence. It's actually probably even, we'll call it a Liam Coen conversation, that Trevor Lawrence could end up getting blamed and or credited for, is the whole sophomore slump conversation that you generally get whenever you're in the same offense in a second season. It happens across the NFL. It's a historical thing. Again, I'm not making this up. It's a thing because NFL defenses got nothing but time on their hands all off season. And what does that normally mean? I got time to watch some tape. I got time to figure out what you do well and what you struggle with. And now I'm going to make it a little bit harder to make you do the things that you don't do well, that you show me visibly on film you don't do as well. And now I know how to make you counter to show me that you've improved on this thing. Maybe I'm going to start sitting on routes like the San Francisco 49ers you did religiously against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm going to make you beat me deep. And if you don't, then you're going to have one hell of a season. And I've been saying this for 5 years straight. So if you're a religious DuvalDive listener, you know I'm consistent in this point about all NFL quarterbacks. Like, after that year one performance in an offense, that's normally the best you're going to see from an NFL quarterback. If it works out, it's going to be great that first year. If it doesn't work out in that first year, it's probably going to be terrible at that point moving on. It doesn't generally get better, but this is my current opinion. But following that first season, it's all about how you evolve the offense to be a little bit different. And that's why most offensive coordinators seem to struggle in year two. Same as quarterbacks. That's looking at CJ Stroud, Bobby Slovic. We called that regression. We knew it was coming year two in an offense.
No,
don't
include me in that. I mean, I got there, but that's all you. You're the one that did it 2 years ahead. Just saying.
I called it. Yeah, I called it in the middle of his season one. I'm like, yep, they're gonna look at this. They're gonna look at this film. There's no way he's going to be good next year. He's going to regress in interceptions. He's going to regress in touchdowns. This is easy for me to point out. And then you add to the fact that then you have a backup quarterback situation with Nick Mullins. There's no shade thrown at Nick Mullins. I just think his ceiling's low. He's going to keep the thing from falling off the tracks as far as that's concerned. But I thought they missed an opportunity to also kind of upgrade that position. So I'm just nervous about what this looks like in year two, with teams having a little bit more time and them not necessarily doing something to materially kind of raise that ceiling of what this offense is going to look like.
Fair enough, man. I know, and I like the point you're making. It's not necessarily that Trevor's a sophomore, but the fact that offense is here in Duval, and now that time is had to watch film, as you put it, in a league, by the way, that has defensive tackles like Jeffrey Simmons, DeForest Buckner, and we'll just say that the Houston Texans defensive front.
Yeah, all of them.
So,
yeah. But let me ask you this big one though. Who do you think will carry? So maybe not should, but maybe will. Let's start with that. Who do you think will carry this team in 2026?
The offense or the defense?
Yeah, man. Offense or defense? When all said and done, when we get to week 18, when we're looking back at the season, who carried the season? Who carried them to the majority of these wins? Who made this thing happen?
So the correct answer is actually special teams, because Cam Little's amazing. No, no. And the reason why I lead with that joke is when I hear, James Gladstone and see their draft ally to it, that they're trying to play more 12 personnel, that tells me they're trying to make changes on offense to be more balanced. When I see on defense some of the changes they've made, and then they're shifting Travis Hunter away from the offense to go to defense, that tells me that they think they have a lot more weapons and bodies and a lot more spice in the kitchen. I'm going to say offense for now, because they have Trevor. They feel like they have the receiver core, and everybody please notice that we didn't put the receiver core as one of the reasons the team got worse. Just saying. But I think with all the weapons there, with the picks they have made at tight end, I get the feeling, the writing on the wall, such as they say, is that they feel like the offense got worse and they're going to be attacking with balance, which would keep games where you have to have a defensive turnover make the difference in order for the Jags to win, which we saw a lot of. I mean, I'll just say the past few seasons, let alone just last year, right? The defense was a huge part of that, and arguably the bigger part against the better teams. We saw the offense show out against the Jets, who, the Orlando Storm currently have more interceptions than the Jets do. And an Orlando Storm defensive lineman in Amani Bledsoe has more interceptions than the Jets. I told you as much on the Storm Surge podcast here sometime this season with the UFL. Okay. That's not the offense running the show, but when on the schedule, you have teams out of the AFC North doing business like that, you got to face that group. Granted, the Bengals aren't exactly known for defense, but hear me out. And then you're playing the Eagles. You're playing the NFC East, who's upgraded on defense, except for perhaps the Cowboys. No disrespect to Malachi Lawrence, who I talked about getting drafted on both UCF Night Zone and Locked On UCF. And you're playing the alleged AFC defending champions, only by trophy, not by actual play or title in my mind, the New England Patriots, right? So if you want to win that game, regardless of how overrated their quarterback is, how overrated he may be, you still have to be able to outscore that defense. And, the offense, they think they'll do that. The defense, if they can't stop Drake May, that'll just prove my point.
Yeah. looking at all the turnovers and everything that happened last year and how uh, unreliable the Jacksonville Jaguars defense ended up being in a lot of those clutch moments and those crunch moments.
Good
I mean, you're talking late in the Cincinnati Bengals game, you're talking late in the Houston Texans game. I mean, you could even say late in the Raiders game. And I know they won that game, but bro,
Well,
we
that's
know
the
what we
thing.
saw.
The
We know
Raiders
what we
game,
saw
a last play of the game by not Caleb Saunders.
by Devon Hamilton. Yeah.
And then, you mentioned the Bengals game specifically, which could have been a clutch defensive play that won it, but we both saw Tyson Campbell get toasted. Yeah.
Yeah, you got the toast, and you got the Travis Hunter knockdown that was a penalty. But there's so many reasons that game should have been different. But nevertheless, my underlying point is that defense was unreliable at the ends of a lot of games. They couldn't get home, and like all these reasons. So, like from my perspective, if the Jaguars are going to have the season that they want to have, the answer to this question needs to be the defense. What the answer to this question from my perspective will be is that the offense will lead this team. And that's probably not what you want if you're Liam Coen. You want Anthony Campanelli to be ending this season in the conversation for defensive coach of the year, and in head coach interviews this entire upcoming offseason after this 2026 season, because then that means the Jacksonville Jaguars obviously did well a second season in a row, maybe even better as far as the secondary and this pass rush is concerned. I just have my concerns that they haven't necessarily done enough to get home. And that's where this whole conversation of the concerning areas of the Jacksonville Jaguars and if they actually did regress. So my answer is offense, but maybe they go more 13, 12 personnel. They control the clock. They play a little better defense, and there are ways to make that happen.
Maybe they ask less of the defense. That's another point too. If the offense pulls that off, then they definitely were the ones that run the show, right?
Yeah. So again, playing against these other teams, Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Philadelphia Eagles, etc., Denver Broncos, you're going to be playing a lot more of that smash mouth football. A lot of teams trying to just kind of dominate you up front, and you're going to be trying to do the exact same thing with all these tight ends these newfound tight ends you brought into this ecosystem, as they like to say. Yeah. So again, we'll see where it lands, but overall, that's my prediction, is that it's going to be offense. But if the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be successful, I think they need to be looking at maybe a top 5 defensive kind of performance. Like, I think it's going to have to be to that level, and maybe the offense takes a small step back purposefully.
Fair enough. It's less that they take a step back and more than they're asked to do less. And I see exactly where you're going with that.
Oh, yeah. It's like that Seattle Seahawks game and maybe even the Rams game. I know the Rams scored a boatload of points, but let's be real. They scored a boatload of points because they kept getting the ball in some really good situations and also in the red zone. Like, it's not because they were driving down the field as far as that was concerned. And again, Seattle, it was the same thing. They just played great defense, scored on some short fields, didn't turn the ball over like that, and it was an easy game for them. I think that's exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars are hoping and trying to do. They may ask less of their offense and just try to play these games a little bit closer to the vest and be a more effective and efficient defense, and it will work better overall. The Jaguars might go from scoring 35 points or something like that a game to maybe 29 points a game. But if you're winning more games, who cares? So I think from that perspective, it needs to be the defense. That's why I'm leaning that it probably won't be, because I still got questions on some of the stuff that actually happened for the guys they brought in on the roster on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, listen, we're not worried about the amount of games won. We're not picking an over-under here. We're not having David Behrman on the show quite yet. So,
not yet.
But with all that in mind, I think that's a fine place for us to cease our conversation about where the Jacksonville Jaguars got worse, how they're worse, I should say.
Yes.
I hope that I did some good acting. DuvalDivers out there, go ahead and leave in the comments if you could tell where you feel like I'm actually acting a little bit or stretching my ability to believe some of these things, because I can tell you I bailist some of you humpy bumpies on this one for sure, but I did it in good faith, just like we talked about at the beginning of the show. So
now let me be real with you. I believe half of what I said. half. It's only half jokes. Like, some of it is no real. Like, some of it I can absolutely understand.
Absolutely.
I can see where there's some hopium and some copium that's going on in the fan base right now. and it's some hopes and prayers that's happening. And I'm with y'all.
Hopefully it doesn't go from hopium to nopium. That's what we need to stop from happening.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, they've earned the right to have the space to grow this thing how they want to grow it, and for us to see what the results that happen on the field. We trust in Liam until he proves that trust should not be evident there, and you trust in Gladstone until he proves that these picks are misses, which may not happen this year, next year, for the next few years. That's a longer evaluation period. But for the moment, you know where I am, man. You know what this is. BigCatCountry.com. Save it as your favorites. Travis D. Holmes on the socials. If you're listening to this podcast on the YouTube side, man, please click that like button. Please write a little comment. It helps us out tremendously, and it hurts you in no way. You waste no time, nothing but time. But again, they tell us the algorithm, it pays us. So, please.
Tell us the algorithm that it pays. That's still one of my
pays us in some weird way. I don't know the math, man, but I don't know how to put this thing together. But they say if you comment, we get paid. So please comment, like, subscribe. Maybe you think about becoming a member. But we appreciate you guys, all of you that's part of the Duval Devout, all of you guys that comment, all of you guys that come in and support us, because it wouldn't be this growing thing in this community without you guys actually being that community. So shout out to y'all. We appreciate you, and let them know where you can be found, bro.
Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at the SOTG. Of course, find my work covering the UCF Knights on UCF Night Zone and Locked On UCF, as well as my work covering the Orlando Storm on the Storm Surge podcast, as well as my work covering the Orlando Magic. Yeah, so that's all the things. And, listen, at Days In, as much as we're talking about draft picks and things like that, I'm just wanting to use this graphic because I like it. Good job by Travis finding it. Winning the draft, repeating as division champions, that's the goal. But with some of these things occurring, we're just not as sure that will necessarily happen. Or will we, as we talk about it on how the Jags got better next episode. So, for my personal champion, Travis D. Holmes, this is Kyle Nash, student of the game. Until next time, everyone, class dismissed.